Suprabhatam, everyone. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviyam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvashavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining on time. I think more people will trickle in as we continue the session. Srini Mahodaya will begin to talk about Shastra Pravesha today. Please take over, Mahodaya.
Sarvebhyo namaskara. Suprabhatam. Good morning, everyone. So let's begin a new topic from where we had continued, and it was so we learned about Sankhya, we learned about the components of the subjects, and also we studied quite a bit about Traigunya Mimamsa, the three gunas described in the Shastras, and especially Bhagavad Gita and Sankhya Sutra, Sankhya Karika, and all that, and also the applications with lots and lots of examples. So now that so what we learned from Sankhya is just that we have a very different viewpoint from the rest of the world. That is, we keep separating the seer and the seen, but always use both seer and the seen, or the knower and the known, the experience and the experienced in our worldview. So the study of experienced will not happen without studying the experiencer. So this constitutes reality for us. So therefore, it will never go away from the person who is experiencing the world. So now, having said that, so we are going to enter into the topic of what is a Shastra. Even though Sankhya is a Shastra, so just want you all to get a rigor of what and why the experiencer is important. So that gave you an introduction. So we're going to enter into Nyaya, Vedanta, and those kinds of topics. So which are all nothing but Shastras. And so we need to see what is a Shastra to understand it further and to see if it makes sense. And this is the Shastric worldview. Right? So what is it? Our classical definition says Shasanat, Shamsanat, iti Shastram. So what it actually means is Shamsanam, meaning it is a descriptive but with a disciplined approach and more on the side of the that which actually guides you, right? And Shasanat, Shasana is the rule or a very disciplined method. And now Shastra is both authoritative and a disciplined method to function as a valid means of knowledge. It becomes a pramana and guides a qualified seeker toward a meaningful human purpose. So here there are many qualifiers that we have used. So we're going to get deeper into what it actually means. How is it actually different from treatise? Everybody knows what a treatise is or what we have heard of. I mean, there are treatises, there are essays, there are commentaries and all of that. But Shastra is a very different term, right? And let's see, what is not a Shastra? If it does not have a clear purpose, it is not a Shastra. They have to define what it is, right? You will see that in the beginning of every Shastric studies, you will see what is the prayojana or the purpose. And it should not be contradictory. It may be seemingly contradictory to the external world, but there is always internal consistency. So they don't negate each other. Right? It should not. Okay. A shastra, by definition, should not be self-contradictory, or it should not have internal contradictions. And if it is not producing any transformation in conduct or knowledge, it is not a shastra. What does it mean? It should be transformative, not just informative, right? It is not driven by ideology, power, or persuasion rather than truth. This is where we completely differ from other religious treatises, right? No ideology. It's not about power. It's not about it or persuasion to make you do something like it's imperative. It's a rule. No, it's just a truth description, and it will have if and then conditionals too, because reality is seen conditionally, and it is conditional. And what's the definition? To from our point of view, a little more, because we are conditioned to learning definitions, we are conditioned to learning explanations, we are conditioned to approach topics for information, for persuasion, and all of these things. One thing, we don't use any treatise as a pramana, but here is where it differs. Shastra is authoritative teaching, and it's a valid means of knowledge. Clearly teaches a subject to qualified seeker. It's not a believer, and it's not just a seeker, but a qualified seeker for a meaningful human purpose in a manner free from defect, trying to be. You're not always. Shastras also open up saying that ityadi. So they can accommodate what you discover over a long period of time and conducive to right action or realization. So it has to result in the prayojana, has to have a it has to trigger a right action or realization, knowing about oneself. If there is no action and if it is simply a realization, yes, even that is a prayojana. So I just wanted to touch upon the topic of Nyaya Shastra, and one of the texts that I'm going to be using, an authoritative one. There are many Nyaya texts, but in the late 1700s, Annam Bhatta combined both Vaisheshika Shastra and Nyaya Sutras, Vaisheshika Sutras, Nyaya Sutras, and then combined it to form Tarka Sangraha. So it is the text that you're seeing here. So this is considered an authoritative compilation of Nyaya. So
what are the different works that he combined to form Tarka Sangraha?
it is so he has used a Vaisheshika Shastram, and he has also used Nyaya Sutras, Gautama's Nyaya Sutra and Kanada's Vaisheshika Sutras.
Okay.
And the Vyakhyanas, and basically the Navya Nyaya and all that, lot of work happened. The Prachina Nyaya and Navya Nyaya. So he made a compendium, a very concise treatise, and that is Tarka Sangraha. In the Shastric studies, they always, there is a sukti called Kanadam Paniniyancha Sarva Shastram Upakarakam. Kanadam, that which is related to Kanada Maharshi, which is Vaisheshika or Tarka. Right? Tarka, Kanadam, Paniniyam. Paniniyam, as you all know, Panini created Vyakarna, or the grammar of Sanskrit language. So if you know logic and grammar, It is Sarva Shastram Upakarakam. Logic and grammar is useful in all the Shastras. So, which is true even to this day. You know, probably logic can be taken as mathematics and Paninian language, math and language skills. They are required in almost any discipline of human endeavors, right? So that is what is said, and that is a sukti. And so Nyaya is a shastra which is used in almost, some, you take any six darshanas, people use that. And if you take in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna himself uses that. Right? You can see a picture here. This is actually showing a person, who's wondering about an object in front of him that either looks like a shell or a silver. Something, it could be silver or shell, but how does he know what is what? It's shining, right? So now, since it shines, it appears bright. So when something is shining and appearing bright, people are attracted, and so is this person. So he thinks, "Oh, this is silver," right? And now he has this desire to, something is shining, something is beautiful to look at, got his attention. He walks towards it and comes close. And that desire, the strong desire is there. At this point, he wants to acquire it. Suppose another person walks by with maybe a torch or something, and then he'll come and examine. Oh, we need to examine this in the right light, and then shows him what it truly is. Oh, this is not silver at all. It's only a shell that is reflecting light. At that moment, what happened? His desire for silver disappears. All that excitement that he had, it all goes away, right? And then the action of acquiring it and putting it in his pocket or wallet or a bag, everything is gone. So he was thinking about a bag, and he was thinking about something to hold, and he was thinking about how to protect it. So many things that he imagined, they're not going to happen, because at that moment, all this disappeared. Now, this is where Nyaya says, oh, since it actually helped in removing the right knowledge, removed the desire and the suffering, it is also giving a clue as to how to achieve liberation or moksha. This is how traditionally Nyaya was being taught. Right? What is the use of Nyaya? It is also to liberate you, Nyaya Shastras. And what happened with Vedanta and Vedantins and all that, that's beside the point. But this is the prayojana of Nyaya is also moksha. Atyantika dukkha nivaranam. So it is to remove that suffering. So it removed desire, and by getting the right knowledge. So what is the importance of Shastra from this? Even sincere perception and intelligence, they can produce error unless guided by a disciplined theory of knowledge. Without a Shastra, any appearance is true for you. Mirage is real, and you start acting upon that false knowledge. The desire and the suffering, they inevitably follow. So with Shastras, we learn more about how knowledge actually fails, what are the limitations of sense organs, and what are the valid means to test our knowledge, and how to systematically remove this error. What are the essential components? Shastra must produce pramana. So this is the consequence, right? It should become a pramana, but what it talks about, it's the valid knowledge. In especially in domains beyond dharma and moksha. It not only it covers dharma and moksha, but it could be beyond that too. Artha, kama, and all that. Shasana. Shasana is systematic or rule based or a disciplined approach, which is taught methodically with rules, definitions, and with rules of reasoning and structure. And it's not merely opinion or speculation, just imagination and all of that. And most importantly, we qualify. We don't talk about any user. We don't talk about any person is qualified. No. Every Shastra talks about Anubandha Chatushtaya. So what are they? They're actually about what should be studied, why it should be studied, who will study it, and how this particular subject or knowledge leads to result. And what is that result is the prayojana. And that is Anubandha Chatushtaya, Vishaya Prayojana Adhikari Sambandha. So these four, and they go elaborately on what it is and why it needs to be defined and all that. But you need to have those components. Pramanya. Pramanya means authority rests on being Vedas. Apaurushaya simply being authorless doesn't mean that the authors are not attributed within the Veda. Lopamudra says that, uh, or Suvartala says that. So all these Rishika saying all these Vivaha mantras, everything, all the deities or the rishis are attributed to many mantras there, right? So Apaurushaya is the word used by the Mimamsakas and also later Advaitins of being author, Vedas having no author. Right? But Aptavakya is what is we are after. The Aptavakya is the expert knowledge. This is a real reliable source or a reliable person, and so they can be used so that they should. The Apta is one who has our hita or our one who wants us to benefit. That is, and that benefit that is really good for us. That's an Apta. So he has to. Is more than a well wisher. He or she wants good things to happen to us. So that's an apta. And it should have not just informative but transformative power, because it removes ignorance and reshapes conduct or makes us realize or gives us self-knowledge. And that knowledge must lead to dharma or moksha. So in the story of Shukti and Rajata, which is a shell or a silver, it is not just a moral story. Oh, he has an error, and so one should not. You made a mistake, therefore you should not repeat it. No, it's not about that. It's actually a technical case, an epistemic case. Now, epistemology is the fancy term for the sources of knowledge and method. So it's all about what went wrong. Here is a perception, and it was defective. So that was a dosha. And there were some features or attributes seen. Shining. The object was shining, and it was white, but they were wrongly connected, and therefore mithya jnana happened. What corrects it is the proper pramana, which is nothing but a pratyaksha itself. You refine the pramana of direct cognition or direct knowledge, which is upon closer perception. Which instrument you use, whether it's a torch or a lens, it doesn't matter. You use your hands and examine it closely, but everything is refining the pratyaksha at that point and to arrive at the right knowledge. So that method that you use is the pramana. reasoning or direct knowledge or using your senses. And the right knowledge is called prama. So we are we're all, especially when we come to darshana, shastras, and all of that, all these subjects are considered lakshana granthas, right? They are not imperatives, they're not rules, but descriptive texts. And what are the Shad Lakshanas? Shastras must be reliable source. When somebody writes it, and when in fact, when you're studying or when your kids at home, we all have heard of, oh, this the Shastra says so, Shastra says so. Whether it is writer or just to have that sense of authority, people talk about, oh, Shastra says, right? That is because it was believed as a reliable source of knowledge, free from deception. And almost everyone, all who consider themselves Hindus, accept Veda as a pramana. So if you do not accept Veda as a pramana, then you're considered Nastika, not whether you believe in God or not. So from the Vaidika point of view, those who rejected the Vedas as a pramana, right? They happen to be Jainas, Bauddhas, and Charvakas. That is who we see in all these Sarva Shastras, Sarva Darshana Sangraha, and all those. Anything about darshanas, you would see that where when someone rejects Veda as a pramana, then they're considered Nastikas. And those who consider Veda as a pramana, they're Astikas. Now, it should have the Vishaya as a Lakshana. So they have to define the subject, and it has to have clearly defined domain. So, for example, Vedanta has to be about Brahman, Arthashastra about governance, and also conduct of the individuals and the society, Vyashti and the Samashti, the individual and the collective, and what the behavior should be. Prayojana, it has to have, every Shastra defines Prayojana, the knowledge must lead to a meaningful human purpose, and they all happen to be in Dharmartha Kama Moksha. And also the correct knowledge is important. So they would stress on that thing. Adhikari is the qualified audience or the qualified seeker. It, it's not about anybody who is interested. No. In Oh, you can enter because if you're interested. No, you prerequisite knowledge or prerequisite qualification is required. It specifies who is eligible to study or apply it, because it is considered if you did not qualify an adhikari, if the audience is not qualified, the shastra actually becomes abhisha. So they keep warning about how to approach a shastra. And the primary qualification is shraddha and discipline. So carefully, distinguished shraddha from discipline, because it means a lot more. It's all about, not only you have discipline, but you have verified the source, and it's like, it's trust, but trust with confidence, and all of that together. Sambandha, and sambandha is what is the relationship of this subject in the shastras, and how is it related to the goal. They would define that thing in every shastra. And abhideya is is the central teaching. What is the core actionable teaching of the shastra? For example, it could be Aham Brahmasmi or Tattvamasi in Vedanta. Okay. So now that we talked about the lakshanas, right? What is a Lakshana? So anybody wants to try what a Lakshana is?
Characteristic.
Okay, characteristic. Okay, can you give me an example?
I mean, if something is basically, it's an intrinsic characteristic. It's basically trying to define
Mm,
what what it would entail, or
mm,
what it's trying to
yeah.
describe essentially.
Mhm. Um, yeah, that's fair, and then that's what we study. And the Nyaya text talk about some beautiful anecdotes or analogies, stories, and all of that. Almost like definitions, sure, chronology. You would see that thing why it can actually differ. Uh, yeah, let's talk about definition, right? Aristotle talked about what definition is. He said, okay, you need to have the genus and the differentia together to make a definition. So you need to identify. Uh, Suppose you're defining an object. It has to belong to a certain class, and the object that you're defining, you should say, oh, where it belongs, and then what is the distinguishing characteristic, right? Um, Man is an animal. It doesn't work. A man is a watch wearing animal. No, because you can put a watch on some other animal too, probably a gorilla. So even that is not going to work. So he came up with the term man is a rational animal. Rationality is the distinguishing characteristic. Therefore, uh, definition holds good now. It's not only animal is the genus where human being belongs, and the genus of the jati, right? And differentia is rationality. So man is a rational animal. So it's very beautiful, no doubt about it. So Lakshana is slightly different. It doesn't exclude this, but you would see something more interesting happening here. So here's an anecdote, or in the Nyaya classes, there is a teacher and a student, and the teacher, he's teaching about he's teaching nakshatra vidya, let's say, and the sky is dark. He takes the students and then says, "Do you see the moon?" And I don't know. No, I don't see. I don't know what a moon is. And then he says, "You see um, those two stars, those twinkling stars?" Yes. And somewhere, come to the mm, come to the middle, and then you see that it's between these two twinkling stars. There is a bigger object, a shining object, and it appears white, and all of these together, right? So, yes. So now that is a moon. So here, so Lakshana is about identifying marks, and also a distinguishing mark at this point, because it differs from other shining objects. And probably, it can actually be multi-layered because a student understands it in a certain way. And anything more, probably the student cannot get it, but he is already identifying based on certain indicative marks. Like Ajay Shastriji said, it has to be it's intrinsic. Yes, it is. It can be intrinsic too, and you would see that it's also a little more than that. Hold on. Intrinsic attribute is called Swarupa Lakshana. And then There is also Tatastha Lakshana. Now, Tatastha Lakshana, there are many times what we define moon currently is the indicative or the Tatastha Lakshana. The Guru actually hasn't defined moon at this point, but he has only talked about where the moon appears and how that object differs. So he has not actually created any object. He has only used indicative features without saying much about the intrinsic features. But the intrinsic feature of moon, the biggest shining object, which is white in color, is also identified, right? And at this point, has he identified the Swarupa? No. But they have only indicated both, that is, Tatastha and the Swarupa. Swarupa is hinted, but Tatastha is actually, the indicative features is actually explained. That will act. That will be the Lakshana, or the essential marks of anything that the Granthas talk about. And you will see that pattern everywhere. It is going to be using the pramanas, the pratyaksha, and the anumana, and they would start identifying every intrinsic and indicative features of anything that they're going to define. And for example, Western philosophy, like what we talked about, is a rational animal. It is more about conceptual analysis. And like Aristotle says, it has to have genus and differentia. Even in the Western traditions, if you don't see the genus and the differentia, that's not a good definition. So what is the epistemic goal? Here in the Indic traditions, it has to have the goal of yathartha jnana. Yathartha jnana is like things as they are. It's got to be precise, and it has to be, I should be able to identify that which exists as it is. And that's the goal. And but in the Western philosophy, it's all about clarity of meaning, especially logical or linguistic. And you can verify, they do the empirical analysis too, but the stress or the explicit definition is about clarity of meaning in all of the Western philosophic traditions. And what is it that they're after, or the orientation? It has to be ontological, it has to exist, and it has to be functional. So they keep asking, what is the true nature of this substance and what is the purpose? The nature and the purpose. And here in the Western tradition, it's going to be, how can we logically classify it? There is a difference between the two. Do you see anything that is striking to you with this approach?
Gee, I have a point here. Nowadays, people say that, oh, accept the way something is or somebody is behaving. It seems like that's a clear indicator from from our philosophy, right? So if you accept the person the way they are, then it is the underlying true nature of somebody or something. So it's easier for you to make a living better or not be impacted mentally. That's what I'm observing from Lakshana. I've heard the Lakshana, probably a million times. I didn't clearly understand the way the word was used. Now it makes sense, and then the English or the Western interpretation, it seems like there's not a clear parallel in the way. Even for us, with so many languages that we hear or understand, they're in different fashion. But the way it's used also, it's also misleading.
Mhm.
I guess it's implying character mostly, or the way things are.
Yeah.
But it's not easy until you show this differentiation between both sides. Yeah.
They all appear somewhat. Oh, we also have it. We also have it. It's a lot of overlapping, and people stress on things being same. They're actually not. At a you know at a physical level, there's a you know the whole entire Western worldview is to focus on what is experienced, and here you would see the experiencer being used even during the lakshanas. So here is an example, and I want to go at least twice on the same topic with examples, so that you sort of start getting where it is going. A descriptive and an analytic approach is how can we logically classify. So what it means is you would see in the popular traditions of Western philosophy or academia, and even in the societal conversations, there is an urge to put something in a box. Do you agree? Suppose, let's say you apply for a job, and you applied for maybe a program manager's job, and your experience is mostly in coding or being a developer. So what would happen when you apply for a program manager's job? Where will you be classified?
Likely not in the way they are expecting somebody to be.
It's almost certain you will not be considered if you start explaining about your development experience. So they always look for some way to present that you do have those transformative skills that can be used for the job of a program manager. And you have to say it. People are going to box you in whatever you did before. So that classification is a real box. It's like it's not a mental box. It's like they see it as a furniture. So it's as real as a sofa and a chair in the living room, right? And multidisciplinary approach, and one teacher teaching many subjects is very common in the Indic traditions. They were never in a box. That what you call specialization is probably after industrialization or during the industrialization, the requirement of specialization was so important. So boxing people, and that thinking is everywhere in every layer of society, where you tend to box people or put them in categories all the time. And here you go. What is the structure of a definition? Because we know the Western tradition more, we do know that it's always single level. Whenever you go for a definition, it's got to be like a one-liner, two-liners, right? It's got to have the genus and the differentia. And it has to meet two conditions, which is necessary and sufficient condition. Meaning, it's a there are now hatred is a necessary condition that happened probably in Germany, 1942, to take it. In those periods, the hatred was necessary for the Holocaust to occur. But what was the sufficient condition? Just because hatred exists doesn't mean something results in an action, and it has to meet a sufficient condition also. Probably let's say, for example, arguably Nuremberg trial. So it has to have or let's say there was a war between India and Pakistan. What was necessary condition? Of course, there was hatred. That was necessary. What was the sufficient condition? Pahalgam, right? So, so these two conditions have to be met in the Western tradition for anything to be logically flawless and avoid all the fallacies. So the single level definition should have genus and differentia, meeting necessary and sufficient conditions. And anything more than two liners, you would see that thing. And they make every attempt to avoid the fallacies, especially the ambiguities and circular logic or whatever it is. But here in the Indic tradition, essential nature is always focused upon. Swarupa Lakshana and Tatastha Lakshana. It can be accidental or indicative, which is Tatastha, but Swarupa has to be there, the essential nature of things. And some considerations are also taken. For example, avyapti, ativyapti, and asambhava. These are the three doshas. What they say is avyapti, and it should not be very constricted or narrow. The definition should not be too narrow. No. And the definition should not be too generic. Avyapti, ativyapti, and asambhava. It should not be impossible. So if these three conditions are tested, then your definition is fine. We'll find more examples later. And what is the relation to reality? And here we have the definitions must align with what exists, ontology. For example, substances, qualities, actions, and there are samanya, like universals, and also in inherence. So these are sapta padarthas and 7 categories. They always have the definitions have to be within these, right? And this is what is perceivable. So therefore, or conceptualized, and this conceptualization should also refer to something in reality. And the definitions should point to reality. But here in the Western tradition, you can define anything. And definitions usually align with language use or logical coherence. It doesn't have to be metaphysical realism, meaning it doesn't have to be necessarily a predetermined category. Do you see that happening in the modern world? For example, gender fluidity. You know that they have a definition for that? One day I may feel this, and another day I may feel that. So you can, but as long as you're clear in the language and show that there is no logical inconsistency in your definition of the term, you probably have a new category formed. Right? It doesn't have to be ontological. It doesn't have to be an ontological truth. So it has to be simply if it aligns with your belief, individual or collective, you're considered valid or logical. Okay, that's why you'll have a lot more disagreement with these kind of things. What's the role of logic? And here in Nyaya, we start with induction, meaning it has to, it starts with examples in the real world. It's got to have that ontological existence, and induction is part of the logical inferencing. For example, let's say, yatra 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 vannihi tatra tatra dhumah. Yatra yatra dhumah tatra tatra vannihi. Meaning, whenever there is a smoke, you see there is fire. There is fire in the hill. Okay. So because I saw smoke, and why? because I see that in the kitchen too. So it is now, it's called the Upanaya, or a relatable example that is personal also, and that is Pratyaksha again. And they are using an example without resorting to any authority here. I've seen the smoke in the kitchen, and they're related to the stove and the fire there. And I see a smoke near the hill, therefore there is fire in the hill. Right? So, this is called, this is a classic example given in the Nyaya tradition. In the Western tradition, we see all men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. And you see, all men are mortal. In Nyaya, Nayayika will never take that position. He is not going to say all men are mortal. Is it in his experience? Most men that he has come across, yes, but is he going to say all men are mortal? So there are concepts of Chiranjeevis, right? So the experience is limited, therefore that example will never be given. Whereas in a classical Western tradition, in the syllogism, what they call it's called three-tuple logic, where a universal major premise, and the minor, universally major premise, minor premise, and then conclusion. These are the three parts. But in Nyaya uses five-tuple logic, where an example is also given. So therefore, induction or inductive logic is inherent in Nyaya, but not in the Western tradition. They always focused on deductive logic. It's predominantly deductive, on the formal validity, truth tables, symbolic systems, and those kind of things. And so at this point, do you see that happening, or at least in your experience? Do you see that a lot of deductive method is being approached? No. Or you simply, no, not really. When I see a lot of reasoning from examples happening all the time, do you see it that way or no? Okay, for example, there is a text called The Organon of Induction that was written by Francis Bacon in 16th century. Until then, induction was never formalized, never trusted, because it does not have the same confidence that you can get from deduction. Like all men are mortal, and here is a person, here is a man, therefore he is. Right? Yes, DCG.
Yeah, the whole pharmaceutical industry is based on that, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So you start, everything is deductive, everything, because it has a sense of authority. And also, most importantly, you would see it's belief oriented. It may like, oh, what is he talking about? But deduction happens because it's belief oriented. Let's come to that point. Why? And so ambiguity. Ambiguity is like, for example, lakshana, we resolve the meaning through the context. Any ambiguity, we can have contradictory qualities and all of that. But we define the context in which the inference is absolute within the context. Because we are mostly, inductive, we are predominant in inductive thinking. So, of course, we use all this direct meaning called abhida, Lakshana, the indicative meanings, and the Vyanjana, which is the suggestive meaning. There are three types of meanings. We use all of that thing, and in our approach to understanding reality. Here in the Western tradition, ambiguity is seen as a problem to be eliminated through or via strict analytic definition. If an exception occurs, it is the category must be discarded. For a very long time, inductive method was not even trusted in the Western tradition. Here is an example. All swans are white, and this bird, this swan, is also white. Therefore, it's also a swan, and this bird is a swan, and it's also white. Right? Whatever I see now, all swans are white. I started with the belief that all swans are white, and any bird that resembled swan was considered swan, and it was white, and so it was true. So now they went and discovered birds that were black in swan. So they really had to rework whether should we consider this swan, this black swan, a swan or not. But it had all qualities of a swan. There are many, the inductive method was not so trusted, and the deduction were very fast, and they believed in it. And when deduction, when they found an exception, they wanted to change the category itself, whether it should be a different category of the bird or not. Should it even be considered a swan because the color is different? Now, this kind of thinking happens all the time. It is linguistic foundation is always we tie it to Vyakarana and Mimamsa. The meaning emerges from the rules that are governed, but organic language structure. So you do see a lot of etymological definitions and also connecting it to reality. But here in the Western tradition, it's rooted in logic and reference. It's often treated as formal symbolic relationship. If it has some kind of a mathematical rigor, it's considered valid. There are certain advantages to that too, but the difference is important. So you can start looking at the examples here. So we talked about Lakshana-based Indic philosophy. That's, we have to have the Swabhava or the Swarupa Lakshana and the Tatastha Lakshana, both essential and the indicative marks to define a thing. And Western philosophy talked about conceptual analysis, the genus and the differentia. And for example, a cow, right? What's the essential nature of a cow? It has to be giving milk, right? What is this? How do they define cow? In what is a cow? It doesn't have to be strictly based on the intrinsic nature. If you just say a dewlap, an animal with a dewlap, with a with certain for example, bovinus, right? That's the that's the genus, and with a dewlap, a member of the class of bovinus with a dewlap, and that's enough. Just like human is a rational animal, but in the Indic traditions, it has to give milk or capable of giving milk. And you can't define it by horns or anything else. And dewlap is very much necessary because that is indicative, right? And what is the epistemic aim? It has to point to correct cognition or the yathartha jnana. So, but here, clarity and precision of the definition, that is super important. Then we'll see, whether it maps to reality or not. Well, who knows? We can't know it. It's got to be. It has already started with the belief. Clarity and precision. Precision is super important in the Western scientific tradition too. Example in the Lakshana-based philosophy, hey, you see that Rajju Sarpanyaya. Rajju is the rope and the snake. That error is you have all the various methods of correcting the errors to go for the valid perception. Either you refine your direct or the pratyaksha pramana, or you refine the anumana pramana and then verify it. But whereas in the Western tradition, you got to clarify the knowledge, and a lot of work happens there. For example, you can say 2 + 2 = 4, but in the Western tradition, they question that too. For example, for an Indic mathematician, Ganita is simply used for calculation. It has to serve a mathematical. The math is all about. I should be able to function in reality and quantify objects, quantify things, quantify any of these categories such as attributes. So math is simply a means of calculation, right? It's a method to calculate. Whereas in the Western tradition, it has to establish something like a pure truth. So you would see 2 + 2 = 4 requiring 300 pages of proof, Bertrand Russell. Right? And so the clarity and proof, these are very important. The precision is super important. And here you go. One such thing happened. It's called a Gettier case. A Gettier, let's see, we have that thing. So, and it was very interesting. It happened in 1963, I guess. In 1963, there was a person by name Edmund Gettier, a philosopher. In the Western tradition, the major premise or the starting point should be an established truth, and it should be a belief. And how do they define knowledge? Knowledge is defined as here, I guess. Yeah. Sorry, the same page I was in. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So knowledge is defined as justified true belief. Knowledge is defined as justified true belief. And Edmund Gettier proved that actually the definition of knowledge as a true belief can be justified, but that is not knowledge. And a person is, I know John. He is driving, let's say, a Honda Civic. He's driving a Ford. His example was, I know John. I believe he drives Ford. Or if I don't see John in the in Ford, he is in Barcelona. Right? It may be a true belief. It starts with that kind. If I don't see John in Ford and he is in Barcelona, and this John was found in Barcelona when he called. See, John being in Barcelona was purely accidental, but it is verifiable. When you verify if John is in Barcelona, and if it happens to be true, the knowledge is true. But in reality, John does not own a Ford. Accidentally, he is in Barcelona, Spain. When verified by Edmund Gettier's claim was, I know my friend John, he owns a Ford, or if you don't see him in Ford, he's in Barcelona. Somebody called and found that John was in Barcelona, so the belief of Edmund is true. Now, is this valid knowledge? Edmund Gettier asks. No, it is not, because he could have been elsewhere. It is accidentally he is in Barcelona. So justified true belief is not knowledge, because John does not own Ford to begin with. But he believed that he owns Ford. So this is not even knowledge. This is pure belief, and belief is not knowledge. So this is a 1963. There are many debates happening about this thing, because even to this day, a Western tradition holds that knowledge is justified true belief. That's why they start with, even to this day, it's deduction heavy. We'll come to that point again, but just wanted to touch upon it and how error is eliminated. And when we find errors of ambiguity, we simply go by the context. Almost everyone does it through common sense, but philosophically, it is not so in the Western traditions. The belief is predominant. It might be leading to many questions already. That's fine. Hold it there. We'll go forward. Orientation. So it is both, we are going to go after what is and what it does, ontological and functional. And example is, Atman and role in action and liberation. If you define what is Atma, what is self in uppercase S, you have to define it in terms of its action or what's its goal. What does self mean in psychology or language is all there is to it in the Western approach. Self has no meaning whatsoever other than psychology. And the soul that you're going to see in all of the Western philosophic traditions is soul is nothing but mind, or the Sukshma Sharira is what we refer to. So we have Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, Anandamaya koshas. All the koshas minus Annamaya is what we call Sukshma Sharira. And that Sukshma Sharira is called soul in the Western tradition. And there is no such thing as self. But self is apart from all of these koshas for us. And so soul is not same as Atma. So that's the whole point. And our definitions are multi-layered and avoid sati vyapti avyapti doshas. But here in the Western tradition, they have to meet just necessary and sufficient conditions to be a valid definition. Yeah. So as you can see, relation to reality, it has to be one of the categories, such as the substance, quality, or action for us. But here in the Western tradition, it's got to align with language or logic. It has nothing to do with metaphysical reality like the substance, quality, or action. No, it doesn't have to be that. So example, we have dravya or the substance that is existing independently of language. Whether or not I know the language, it can exist. Whereas, in the Western tradition, there is nominalism. It doesn't have to map to reality at all. In the all of these currently postmodernism, right? These words are simply constructs of society. Truth is also a construct. It's nothing but justified true belief of a certain section of people or a group of people at a certain time and place. There is no such thing as a real substance. It's simply words and meanings for those words, not mapping to reality. So you can have any categories. I can say, I can be a cat one day or a dog one day and all of that. So it can go to that those kinds of extremes too. And you would be wondering, do such people exist? But it's been proven that yes, it does. And there are political movements believing that is true. So truth is simply a construct of the society. Right? So the universals are just names. They don't have to map to any reality. There's no such thing as a substance independent of language. And logic, we had to have both inductive and deductive. But in the Western, as we said, it's predominantly deductive. Smoke related to fire examples is the invariant relationship. Invariant meaning if there is I see a smoke, therefore it is related to fire. There's a sambandha is established. It's invariant relationship. But the sambandhas and the relationships are not very important. They're not defined. The entire syllogism doesn't talk about sambandhas or the relationship. It's all about truth table, binary logic. And so context is not very important. Absolutes and binaries are super important. Ambiguity, it's very natural for us to occur. You need to have even in nature you do see many contradictory qualities, but they're not contradictions if you see them in a proper context and with the power of semantics or meanings. Here, even in nature or in any of your conceptual categories in the Western world, it's very problematic. It must be eliminated by precision. Okay. Example, in modern medicine. So any influence of mind must be eliminated, right? To have the proper definition of a good medicine. Right. And example, Ganga. One example is Ganga means I am no. I live in where do you live? And instead of saying in Kashi, one could say, oh, where Ganga is. I mean, I live where Ganga is. Even in the language, you would find that thing. But that doesn't mean it's indicatively somewhere near the river bank of Ganga. But here, proper names must have fixed reference. You just can't, especially proper names. I live in Ganga for it won't make sense in the Western world because it's got proper names cannot be used for any indicative meanings. You will see that kind of example. Any ambiguity will not be tolerated. For example, the accents too. So people have certain ideas of this is the only right accent wherever you go. Even though there is no real treatise on accents for English, there's no phonological method or recognizing something is the right accent. You won't find it, but people have a lot of opinions on that. But you do have shiksha, a shastra that is a phonological reference when it comes to Indic languages. Language base. We have to be rooted in Vyakarana and Mimamsa in all of the Shastras, but in the Western philosophic tradition, logic and inference is enough. So all our Vakyas actually, the sentences give us meanings, but in the Western philosophy, simply if there is any word or any symbol, if it maps to what it refers, that's enough. Just mapping of symbol to referent is enough. And suppose exceptions occur. So what do we do? If you give if I encounter a black swan, the induction is not invalid. Like in the Western tradition, induction is not trusted. Okay, induction is trusted because pratyaksha is how we start, and pratyaksha and then anumana. So therefore, if our categories come across exceptions, we don't break the concept. We simply accommodate it. Okay. And but in the Western tradition, you have to make a new category. Closed lotus is still a lotus. because we have a, we are not, it's not a rupavada. Forms of things and forms of concepts, forms of objects are not are accidental qualities or temporary. So they go by the swarupa. So closed lotus is still a lotus, whereas if there is an edge case, it can cause a category revision in the Western philosophy. Closed lotus can be a different category together. Example, rock music. Rock music. How many categories do you think are there in rock music? Anyone? Rock music. So there are, for every, at the most you can have slow rap or fast rap or anything, right? But it doesn't work like that. You can have pop rock, popcorn rock, and even pink rock. There's, if you see the categories of rock music, even geography decides what the category can be, or an instrument that is used can make a different category. It's indie rock, correct. Yeah, you can have many categories. It doesn't have to be. It is not governed by a rule. If you feel it is different, you can claim it's different, and you do see that thing. It is not going to be. They're not going to be seeing one in the many, but many in the one. So when someone claims that they're unique and innovative, but you do see that even though it's the same thing, they they tend to go for that bheda, the difference, and making a separate category. Probably 20 or 15, 20 years back, if somebody said cloud and it's a new category altogether, even in fact, I have seen. I remember Oracle CEO saying that it's just a bunch of computers networked. Don't call it some kind of an innovation. Right? Cloud is not an innovation. It's a different way of doing the business. But you know what happened later, right? He was defining it in terms of essential qualities, but people came up with a different business concept and making it a different category. So it's very common. It's very common to come up with they revise the categories and come up with a new category altogether. Whenever there is an exception in its either in its function or its in service, whatever it is, just one thing is enough. So it talks about the tendency of the collective, or the tendency of the society to go for more and more categories. And you'll see, because it's also in the Western tradition, it is held that the choice is moral. So if you go and want to enroll in a university today, you don't have 4 to 10 categories of subjects. You'll have like hundreds, right? And many times the one is not too different from the other. But they try to create a subdivision or a specialization. Some may be necessary and many are not necessary. In the Indic philosophic tradition, direct realization or the aparoksha jnana is pursued, whereas in the Western tradition is coherence, theoretical coherence and explanation. Now, where, for example, Vedanta aims at moksha, but here analytic philosophy aims at clarity. Isn't Vedanta analytic? It is. It is holistic too. It aims at the prayojana called liberation or moksha, but here the aim is just clarity. And self is defined by nature plus function. That's the most important distinguishing quality here, where nature of the self and its function is an eternal knower, witness. But here, self is, even to this day, it is not defined. still defined according, various theories have various definitions of self, and nobody talks about the concept of Atma. It's not there. Whereas you would see that that's the first thing they did in the Indic traditions. And for example, Atma is Karta, the doer, and the Bhokta, the enjoyer. Where Descartes, or the Humes, Descartes talked about the self is the mind, and David Hume talked about the bundle of thoughts is the self. And knowledge is called prama, or the valid cognition. It's produced by the process of the pramanas. As we said earlier, in the Western tradition, it's justified true belief with conditions or conditions. And knowledge is valid across inference and works correctly. Is supposed to work correctly because inference is right, anumana is right, pratyaksha is right, anumana is right. Therefore, the knowledge should be correct. That is the Indic viewpoint. Knowledge is valid in the Western tradition. Knowledge is valid only if the belief that what the belief that you hold is justified. Okay. How do you justify? Verification. You should be able to falsify it, and if you can't falsify it, it's justified. Right. So when it comes to epistemology, how do we differ? So all Nyaya, Mimamsa, and Vedanta is combined here in this slide, and you would see the approach. In the West, so contradicting with the Western classical Greek to modern analytic philosophy. Right? The central question that is taken is, how does valid knowledge arise? That is the point we consider even in the Nyaya Shastras. This is just an entry point, like I said. And in the Western, all of its Western philosophic tradition, you see, when does a belief count as knowledge? Why does that happen? So I just want you to sort of jump in and then say, anything that you know about why you think, I have at least repeated like 10 times that belief is predominant. Do you agree or disagree? Especially in the Western tradition. We have seen all the scientific progress, and it's probably scientifically more advanced, right? Scientifically and technologically. But when you consider the philosophic worldview of the Western tradition, it is belief. Anyone wants to disagree? Or you just agree? And how do you agree? The topic too heavy? I don't see the kind of same. Yeah, go ahead and please come on the. It's already 8:25, and
Hariom, are you able to hear me?
yes, I can. Yeah.
Okay. I had problem with my mic earlier.
Okay.
I mean, it must be that because these things, they keep changing as time goes by, and with things like marketing, we're talking about the Western worldview in the West,
the worldviews, yeah.
right?
And
so then, whenever there's something, for example, the greatest marketing that was done was about breakfast. How breakfast, and what is the best thing for breakfast? Oh, the American breakfast, this whole bacon, and to bring bacon as a breakfast item, what type of marketing was done, and then now till today, even after that has been disproven, and there's so many doctors or whoever is saying that bacon is like bad for everybody, it's like the worst thing that you can actually consume. Forget about breakfast, but in general, people are still continuing to consume that for as a breakfast item, and that, and cereal's another one, right? So it's all about, when it talks about, and this infiltrates into our practical daily living, right? So that keeps changing. So initially it was, oh, eggs are the best, and then da 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 da, and what's to say 50 years later that will, it'll change. The world was flat, and then now it's round, and then now it's not flat anymore, and maybe it's flat again. There's a whole sect that's going on saying, actually, you know what, the world is flat.
Yes.
So it's all AI, and it's not not true, whatever they're saying. Did they land on the moon? Did they not land on the moon? There's just so much marketing, and it's all so much of fluff that influences lifestyles and influences whole cultures, that the Western philosophies are that leads me to believe that yes, the whole thing is based on belief, because it's all about who can say
justify the belief.
Justify it and say the quote unquote truth the loudest, because there is no pramanam, like what you say.
Yeah, I mean, loudest, you mean that majority should hold that belief, is it right?
Yes.
That's the whole
And
point.
as long as the majority holds it, and how do you make the majority? They've perfected that, right? Like, how do you make the majority hold a certain
Belief
system?
I mean, multi-grain bread.
Yes.
Yeah, that rules the roost, right? Yeah,
It's there everywhere. And the thing is, because now with social media and everything, everybody's buying into all these belief systems, and there are multiple belief systems. So to be able to, if you say that, no, what's the alternate truth?
You said it's that some, for example, when I came here in 2000, I saw almost everyone going in and buying water for Y2K problem. The same thing happened everywhere in the world, but the urge to buy water and then accumulate, because water wasn't not going to be there, and then everybody was in. You couldn't get water if you walked to an HEB or Safeway and all those stores, because people were buying water. They thought that the taps would not be functioning.
Same thing with COVID and toilet paper.
Yes, yeah. COVID is another case where everybody's going to die, right? There seems to be the predominance of that belief system is very, very high, though, and it's very deductive. And I think any belief-oriented society is a very deduction-heavy society, deduction logic-heavy society. Yeah, it's the brain is conditioned for it.
And you see, this is even infiltrating into our own, into like yoga, because that is so prevalent here. They say, oh, yoga, we what we want to do is we want to break all these belief systems and etc., etc. So then it goes into the opposite end.
Yes, and here you see the many categories of yogas. Had anyone thought of beer yoga, hot yoga, and goat yoga? There are different categories,
There's just so many.
Yeah, it doesn't have to depend on that intrinsic nature of the subject, right? It has nothing to do with yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, nothing like that. It doesn't have to refer to its goal, which is realization. It doesn't have anything to do with as long as the form. Oh, there is a goat. The forms are indicative marks are super important for them to make a category. If you keep a beer bottle while you're doing yoga, it can be called beer yoga. It's very different from the other yoga. As long as you have high temperature, it's called hot yoga. You see, it's a different category altogether. We are very different. We do hot yoga. It's got so many benefits. So we have, somehow the intrinsic nature of yoga or the Swarupa Lakshana or the concept of yoga is not important at all to make a category.
Gee, one more point I felt is that when you are following something, when you're doing certain things certain way, people call us like orthodox.
Ah,
And I don't understand the word of orthodox. I'm failing to understand. I don't even want to know what orthodox means. It may not even apply to what we do.
ah.
But they call people like, oh, you're orthodox. You're not, in the modern times, things
Oh,
like that.
oh, yeah, yeah.
So it's
Being-
like, I think they're after, certain belief system, like, you know, using that as from a Western lens, truly being like that. So it's
Yeah, there's-
more of a defense right now than just being ourselves. Like, what is wrong with being ourselves?
yeah, for us, even the because it has to be in the. I mean, gratitude is to be in the form of tarpana, and all of that. It has to be in an action, and it can be a symbolic action, but it has to be the gratitude towards your parents and ancestors and things like that. So the idea of being ritualistic is very different from what the Western world holds. Yes, we practice gratitude in terms of actions. So that is what people refer to as being too ritualistic and mindless. Yeah, that's probably what they refer to. And also, I mean, even those rituals that we talk about, for example, all the agamas and all of that, they all talk about pramanas. For us, in the Indic tradition, if you're following the pramanas, if you're following the process correctly, the process of using the pramanas, it results in rightful action, right? It's dharma. You do that thing because pratyaksha is dharma. Okay, basically, dharma is all about in conformance to reality, right? Pratyaksha, using sense organs, is you're conforming to reality, and you're using inferencing anumana, anumitikaranam. So you're following the method of inferencing based on the pratyaksha. So therefore, that is also dharma. Therefore, your conduct is also dharma, and our rituals are purely dharmic in that sense. That is not how it is seen. What is important is, all right, you claimed a certain thing as true. My belief is different from your belief. I have to falsify it. So therefore, I have to have many experts that hold my belief to validate your belief. This is called peer review. You agree? Peer review is super important in a deduction heavy society.
Yeah, it's more like benchmarking and then kind of, you
Yeah.
know, pros and cons of like which way you want to carry your conversation, and
Yes.
it's not really,
Suppose in a peer review group, if you have a flat Earth society, and you come up with the term, hey, no, actually the Earth is round. So what's the peer review going to do? That's what happened, right?
And shoot it down.
So yeah, Nicolaus Copernicus executed. After a while, Galileo said the same. See what happened? He was imprisoned. So peer reviews have always been here. It's also generated from a belief-oriented society. Or when you're using the pratyaksha anumana and then shabda, upamana, arthapatti, and shabda, why do you need peer review for everything? You're following the pramanas, you're refining your pramanas, they're coming up with the truths. Therefore, you see that idea of measurability and falsifiability in the Western scientific tradition that we see, you you don't see that kind of precision oriented uh, process in the Western in the Indic tradition. It's not that precision is unimportant. Accuracy is more important than precision. That's the whole point, right?
Gee, so rather than peer review, because your peers are those who are on the same journey around the same time frame as we are. So there's a possibility for mistakes.
Yeah.
Or so that's why we have our guru that we go to, who has the adhikara, because even we do not know, we base it on the shastra, pramana, etc., but we are still learning. We are not experts.
Yeah, we do know that, for example, in our pratyaksha, pramana can go wrong, and all mistakes arise because of the mistakes in pramanas, or how we use the pramanas. Because my eyes have very limited visual sensation, so therefore my visual perception of the pratyaksha may not be correct, right? So I don't have an instrument, a microscopic or telescopic kind of telescope, microscope, or helicopter. Well, these are the viewpoints for the pratyaksha, right? And if they don't, I mean, if I do know that there are my limitations, then I would probably consult with a guru or an apta, or higher authority who I trust, who actually wishes well for me. So that person is going to tell me the truth. But that is used after pratyaksha anumana. But in the Western tradition, that's not the case. You have to go for a peer review the moment you claim for falsifiability. So you have to provide your method of experimentation. I mean, I'm talking about very rigorous scientific traditions. So they'll conduct the same experiment, and if it does not produce the same result with the same conditions, the necessary and sufficient conditions, your claim is false. So Ayurveda, irrespective of 2000 plus years of time-tested results, they are considered what wacky, or what you call quackery, right? Because it doesn't go through clinical trials with 60 people, 30 people, 60 people, double-blind study. Therefore, they do not consider. So time tested, which is both pratyaksha, anumana, and also not the double blind probably. So you should have it. Not that it's wrong or anything, but you can have it. But that is the only method to falsify and validate. Yeah. So peer reviews are important. Yeah.
Namaste.
Yes, ma'am.
So we will conclude the session. Dhanyavad Sriniji for the wonderful session on the Shastras, and Dhanyavad everybody for joining the meeting. We'll conclude with the Shanti Mantra. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Ram Ram.
ಧನ್ಯವಾದ.
ಧನ್ಯವಾದ.